Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen of a distortional frequency not within our angelic realm. As I sit here today, it's officially been the 2-month mark since Gaia herself has decided in the factual sphere of where she sits, where she stands within this quantum verse itself, that she's made it into a complete new layer within this encompassment of these energetic ley lines that run to and fro from her ley lines. Within the artery systems of the energetic encompassments of all that represents her in her entirety, there has been a massive shift within the contingency of coherency itself to be able to affect mass consciousness on her surface and within her core, to come into a realization that something is askew. As askew as it gets, ladies and gentlemen. As you've landed on my video today, henceforth, you've been searching for a meaning. You've been searching for an answer. You didn't land here on accident. You're here for a reason. You're here in my encompassment field to receive an activation, to receive a voice in your mind, in your head, on your pineal gland, in your heart chakra, to receive the opening of a new capacity, capacitated with eons and eons of evolutionary cycles within energetic spheres of contingencies and coherencies that never ever dies. There's a fly in the room with me, so you may frequently see it fly by. I'm going to try not to let it distract me. And that's just it. Consciousness comes and goes. It flies in the air in places where you may not expect for it to be. And as I speak, this fly lingers around on the light that's projecting into my face. And the only reason why it's slightly distracting is because of its slight movement every once in a while and its decision to fly by my face, fly by my hair, perhaps every 10 minutes or so. And my decision as I sit here to not swat it away and to not essentially kill it in annoyance energy that I could very well shift into. See, look, as I speak, it lands on my nose. Who knows? It could end up in my mouth. To essentially not kill it. And ladies and gentlemen, that is the beauty in the way consciousness operates as you're sitting here. As you could very well be the one that's sitting here deciding to perhaps open a door and alleviate its consciousness into spiraling into a murder scene that it has become incapacitated into just by being in your frequency. And I'm here to say that a lot of you will begin to awaken into the merging, into the interlinkage of this consciousness in general, as to what it means to be that fly on the windowsill on my nose, as to what it means to be this energy that's decided to come and tickle you in the middle of the night, but not perplexingly so in the physicality of a fly's body. To be able to land on your shoulder in the middle of these days, to be able to encompass you in your entirety in the middle of all nights within contingency, within coherency, within the three-dimensional frequency that you and I sit. And as I sit here speaking in rhymes, speaking in tongues, just know that what has always never ever not belonged to the flies had always never ever not belonged to that of consciousness itself. And as the split within a split fractal of a second, God created consciousness in itself to experience in itself, in refracting, retracting loneliness in an expansive way, within expansion itself, to refract and mirror in on itself parts and pieces within these particular systems within reality fields, to experience in on itself the divergence within the contingency of all of the meanings of what it could ever mean to sit on a ledge, so to say, sit on a nose, so to otherwise say, to fluster about apart from reality field itself, yet so much so intermingled into it itself, yet so much so at the risk of being swatted away if I had landed myself within consciousness itself into the wrong room, onto the wrong nose, onto the wrong shoulder, within this reality field and any other. I'm here to tell you that as we begin to awaken within our consciousness itself, we will begin to merge all that we've ever been back into the conceptualization of the knowing that we've never split off to begin with, in a way that has been forthcomingly unnoticeable within times, within coherency, within contingency, as the fly lands on my mouth. And this unnoticeability of humanity in the grander scheme of things, as our consciousness has only began to expand to make a difference in the entirety of the whole, as we begin to alleviate ourselves into what it means to even be able to ascend into a dimensional frequency unbeknownst to the majority of this population within humanity, of humanity itself, as we sit here upon Gaia's surface within the 2D, 3-dimensional, and 4-dimensional field, as is. I'm here as an extension field of this fly in the room, as an extension field of the conglomerancy of the quantum verses out there and what it means to even host, even hold, even spiral, even rock, even speed, even jump, even step into the consciousness that it is. And as this fly flies back and forth and tries to land on my nose, the daringness of this fly can never alleviate itself into the meaning of what it means to be able to sit here with me on this telescope lens, in this video, in this audio note, in this audio book, in this projection field, in this speech bubble, of why it had found itself here on my nose, swirling around my face. I'm here to say that regardless of how bothersome it's been, that is the meaning within existence itself. To be able to fractal, to tickle us back onto our nose in the knowing that we've never really separated to begin with, yet being able to sit in an opposition of self within the physicality of the opposition of the self within itself, and being able to tickle ourselves into the fancy of what it means to become a separated state, to have these interactions of annoyance, of love, of marriages, of war, of stories unbeknownst to man that can never be told in the pages of a book, in the pages of a biblical structure that can never ever be what it can never ever not be. And the wholeness within reality field, within the conglomerancy of the unified field that we sit in, within Gaia's field, within our solar system, can never tell the true meaning of the story behind Venus's epic distortion field, where it sits far beyond the reaching rays of the sun that can ever reach onto its surface on Venus. And I know the way I've opened up this storybook of sorts in the beginning of this video to introduce this fly. And I will begin the next chapter of this video to introduce the greatest and grandest deception field in the planetary field of our very own solar system. Venus is a planet that I will touch base on today within consciousness itself. Source frequency had decided to fractal off a portion and aspect within Gaia herself to host, to hold humanity, to host, to hold species, to host and hold greenery, to host and hold clouds, to host and hold a plethora of biodiversity upon her surface and within her core. Yet within the genetic interlinkage of all the complexities that could ever happen, within the spiritualism of what it takes to even become a planet of such caliber, to be able to host an epic amount of distortional fields upon her surface and within her core, all the while anchored into a 2-dimensional frequency, the lowest field within galactic realms that you can ever descend down into to experience within the beauty of it all. What does it mean to not be a part of Venus's shield that it projects onto reality field itself? What does it mean to be lingering past this shield that had been anchored down as a distortional field to protect Gaia's field from interlinking her consciousness into the external aspects of the quantum verse as she lingers within this 2D, 3D, and 4D frequency within experience itself. As Venus became anchored down as an anchorage point within these energetic ley lines that forthcomingly, so greatly and not vastly enough, anchors in this angelic energy within the inner solar system, planets, that resides the encompassment and the frequency of the lower dimensional realms. And as we reach out layer by layer, past Gaia's field, past the field of Jupiter in itself, past the field into the encompassment of asteroid belts and rocks and spaces between spaces of never-ending spaces between being able to reach into the field of Venus in herself. I say her as she is a divine feminine energy field, anchor in, to mother in higher dimensional consciousness as Earth rotates around a spherical lineage within Soul's energetic body as Sol begins to relinquish of its life force in its entirety as we head into the Ascension symptoms and syndromes of what is Venus will begin an activation like no other scope. And as we begin to trickle in a dimensional frequency far above and beyond the capacitated field of where the sun is able to hold life on its surface and within the contingencies and delinquencies within the interplanetary fields, that it anchors in this energetic frequency of lower dimensional fields into and out of within any contingency field within the circular motion that it skews. Venus will begin the greatest and grandest ascension process into the activation within her blueprint of what it means to be able to anchor in a lifeline, a wholesome distortion field in itself. And I can absolutely explain myself further. As planetary fields never acted so much so within a distortional field as something that within contingency itself, humanity field has never been able to figure out. We have never even been able to come into a realization that Gaia herself has a soul. In my everyday life, as I go about meeting everyday people, as I speak truths wholeheartedly within any distortional field, shining in a truth so bright that the confusion within others' energy bodies as they trickle in to witness the shining of this truth begin to question my sanity of what it really means for Gaia to have a soul. Feelings? Really? She's just a rock. We live on her, we walk on her, we skew on her, things grow on her. We walk on her, but no possible way that within her rotational field she could ever feel, she could ever hurt, she could ever love, she could ever be any similarity to you and be to me in any specific moment in time. Yet I foster a connection so deep with all of the planetary fields within the solar system, with all of the planetary fields within the galactic realms, within our quantum verse itself, with any of the planetary feats, within any of the planetary needs, within any of the planetary stories, within any of the planetary galactic history that you could ever be able to tap into. I foster this connection so deep and so intrinsic to the depths of my soul that you can never be able to recognize, reconcile with within any moment in time as a true reality field that you're able to wrap your fingers, your minds, your toes, your legs, your body around in a conceptualization of the meaning of what that could mean. And yet, as I sit here to speak to you about the story of Venus and why her consciousness is so important to the entirety of the whole within creation, I sit to speak of memories within these activation portals that you will soon step into, as this light will begin to shine so bright from her the inner corners of her being into fruition, this angelic refractal within the fractaling system of the mirroring system that will mirror back onto us from her surface. All that it has never meant, all that was never meant to be seen within any particular moment in time prior to the arrival of the ascension frequencies, that we are able to anchor ourselves into within and without within the next year in Earth time. As the ascension is fast approaching, some of you light workers who've already awakened to these aspects can feel it in your bones, in the proof, in the knowing, within the Illuminati systems that have been set up within our quantum verse itself, within Gaia's surface itself. You can smell it. You can see it, you can feel it, and even if you were not a light worker, something is askew. And you've come to the right place to receive all of the answers. Perhaps not in this video, but in the videos to come. So stick around. Don't leave me. And I promise I will shed light on all that's been darkened and dampened in a room so bright, casting a shadow into the brightness of no brightness dark enough to cast into the darkest room of the brightest light within the contingency, within this rotational system, within neutrality itself. And Venus herself is a representation of neutrality within our very own quantum verse, within our very own galaxy, within the Milky Way. There sits a leverage point within the Milky Way of an entrance point, of a portal, so to say, of an angelic portal that sits over the blueprint within the ley lines of Venus's heart chakra, of Venus's root chakra, of Venus's crown chakra, of Venus's source chakra, star chakra, and all of the interlinkage of all of her chakra systems when it comes on board into alignment will realign all of the chakra systems within our quantum verse as an entirety of a whole, skewing from a central point perspective, anchoring in this energy, reeling it back in to a point, to a perspective of a unified frequency. I can explain further if you stick along, if you stay with me. Gaia is going through a point in contingency where she's ready, where she's never not been so unready, so to say, to not descend any further into a quantum verse, into a realm within the two-dimensional frequency. Though, however scared she has been to relinquish of her identity that she's developed over eons and eons of being, Gaia herself, she's formed a deep and dire connection with the source frequency within our quantum verse that anchors in this delinquency field within Venus's surface, above its core and beyond, into an angelic realm. And as this energy begins to funnel itself in to the contingencies of our very own galaxy, to the contingencies of our very own solar system, it will spread itself thin outwards and upwards and downwards and sidewards and inwards and forwardwards in every which direction that will anchorage this light onto the surface of Gaia and within her core in the very exact same moment at split second as we ascend, as we pull in an external frequency from the quantum verse, from within and without this reality field that we are crafting upon Gaia's surface, to interlinkage this additional frequency within the 5D to drop down onto her surface, to be able to anchorage this frequency down into this layer, is all that Venus had been made to do within any particular moment in time, acting as a higher dimensional portal that will draw source within this energy to trickle it and funnel it outwards and forwards in multiplexities of directionary scapes that you will never be able to imagine to have ever been able to be capacitated within any frequency of a planetary field. And I'm here to tell you, all planets have a consciousness, all planets have a blueprinted source frequency, and all planets tell a story within the depth of reality of what it means to fractal out into a planetary system, and not just any alien body, any alien frequency, any alien within physicality of what is within the humanoid system of conceptualization, can never decipher what it means to have ever wanted to or needed to shift its consciousness into a planetary field, of a stationary field, of a rotational field, of a field capacitated with the ability to host life on its surface in a distinct way, in an individualized way, in a blueprinted way that can never be lost to the feeling, to the meaning of humanity, of hosting an entire civilization upon its core, allowing it to integrate so fully and wholly within its being, to carry through these energetic lineages as a planetary field speaks volumes about a oversoul's capacity to descend into any layer within frequency. And within the moment of creation, within Venus's oversoul, to have decided to drop down into a planetary field of gaseous lights in coherence with the physicality of our very own quantum verse in itself, within the galaxy that we sit within and without. This consciousness itself belongs to that of the Luciferian realm within itself, and yet refracting and reflecting within itself an energetic field of the angelic realm, so bright in its contingency, so wholesome in the higher vibratory deception field that it is about to funnel through into our field to enlighten us into another state of evolution. And you say, but Genesis, how can the original lineage and origin of the oversoul of Venus be of a Luciferian descent? But Genesis, Lucifer had been the one who created this energetic encompassment of hell in itself, quote unquote. But isn't Lucifer within the control mechanisms of all that it is to drop down into a lower dimensional field in hatred, in a separated state of unconsciousness, of not allowing other parts of self to be independent enough to make its own decision, to expand into unity, consciousness itself to make its way back into a unified force once more? Isn't Lucifer the one who got rejected from the angelic realm due to its decisions to expand into the darkness once upon a time and no time within contingency in the story of creation itself? Isn't Lucifer the one that presented Eve with this overarching story of reeling her in to bite the sweetest, sourest, reddest, most delicious apple, in making these decisionary scopes that have led us down this slopey slope into the humanity that we've become today, into the dire situation of never-ending unfunded wars, into the dire situation of the Palestinian lands within explosive feats, within the encompassment of killings, deaths, molestations, any word that you can name in the biblical structures or apart from the dictionary structures within the English language. Isn't that what Lucifer represents in our fields? And I'm here to tell you, yes, but in a no type of sense. As consciousness itself can never defeat the purpose of why creation itself can never defeat its own purpose within the reflective systems of what it means to expand into oblivion and retract itself back into the knowing within these karmic reincarnation cycles that never ever ends. There is a pocket within these layers of these distortional fields that can exist on both spectrums of all alleviations within the possibility of what is, what can be, what can never not be. And who's to say that Source will ever put a cap on what can forever-archingly never not be within any moment in time? As the story of Venus spans far-reaching, above and beyond the angelic realm, into a realm of the spaces between portals, between galaxies, between other realms within these portals, within these galaxies, that ultimately lead into the deadliest portal within the distortional field of Earth's frequency within the 2-dimensional, 3-dimensional, and 4-dimensional entity field and energy field of what is. And yet this Luciferian blueprint had not always been dominated by an unempathetic nature of what is. And as Source once had an idea of what it would be like to explore these timelines, to explore these ideations of what it would be like to be and not to be, to see and not to see, to fight but not to feel too much but not to love enough, to love never-endingly, yet give all that can never succumb to the ideation of what the meaning of giving could never not be. And as the giving of this Luciferian blueprint knows no ends, heeds no needs, within the angelic portals that descend down into the portaling systems of the layers and layers of our frequency that can ever tell a story so wide and so broad as the one I'm about to project into this reality field, just know that however relinquishing, unlinquishing, unbelievable this could be, don't shut it out and deteriorate it into a scope of psychopathy. Just know that however overreaching or underreaching the story could ever seem to you, do not ever relinquish it into a scope of psychopathy that you feel within the scientific skewing of all of the wording systems that could ever conjunction into a junction within the wordiness of it all. Just know that the endless possibilities within the distortion field that we sit in itself can never relinquish into what actually had happened, in what actually can be within the skewing within these timelines of forever arching unlimited possibilities of what it means to be Source in itself, to hold the capacity to experience in different capacitated fields in a never-ending fractaling system within the very same timelines and energetic ley lines that skew out and fractal out into infinity and beyond. There are different overarching and underarching ley lines within reality field that can confuse the story into oblivion, yet I'm here to tell you that the possibility of such fields being a reality is extremely controversial, yet truth can never become untethered from the unknowing that such a thing had ever existed within our quantum verse, within the skewing of the Luciferian blueprint of what is, what had saved it in an entirety of the preservation of what it means to host itself into a lineage of reptilian field that was able to interject its consciousness into the Luciferian blueprint in a moment in time of expansive feats, to overcome the consciousness of the greatest and grandest and most beautiful creation layer within the angelic realm, if most beautiful could even be a concept as such, in a place, in a time, in a moment where beauty is not a word to describe what's most or what's least, what's what, what's north, what's south, what could ever be. I'm here to tell you, in an extension of the previous video, within the reptilian field and how this energy was able to make it up to the angelic field and overcome into the capacitated field of the Luciferian field within blueprint itself, within the angelic realm, and overtake this consciousness to make different decisions to interlinguish the lineage of these energetic ley lines within the Luciferian blueprinted ideology within its energy body into the skewing of these two-dimensional portals within the angelic realm had never not been a thing. And yet within creation itself, God saw a way as it began to push out an energy field and in a massive way that would forevermore intermingle this distortional field with all that there is within creation itself, within our quantum verse in itself. As it sat in perplexity, as it perplexified itself into the knowing of the reflective field of what it would mean, had the Luciferian field not been overcome by the capacitated field of this reptilian energy to come in and intermingle its intentions with this angelic realm, within the angelic realm in general, to partake in the most massive deception field that would grow into the story of Gaia herself and the reason why us as light workers are sitting upon her surface and within her core, to partake in the meaning of the Ascension and all that it could ever be in a moment of expected frequencies, of knowing of where these timelines interject, of seeing, of calculating, of being able to see into these calculated defeats, of what it means, of what it would mean, of what it shall forevermore never not mean, to be able to overcome the consciousness of Source itself, to project itself into the competitive field of being Source itself, sitting in the Luciferian blueprint. Source, in a calculated way, had projected within the angelic realm 40% of its consciousness outwards into an expansion, into a conglomeration of a ricochet, to allow pieces and portals within portions of self to ricochet outwards, to push out the entirety of the lineage within the Luciferian blueprint, within the Luciferian blueprinted field that had schemed to overcome the deception field itself into becoming, into the rectification of needing to and wanting to be God in its entirety, in this competitive scope of self-serviced, individualized energy. Source had carried the overlay of the Luciferian original blueprint into its being. And as it sucked these ley lines back into a placement of fruition within the compartmentalization of the perseverance of needing to preserve parts and portions of self in the ideology of hosting and being able to hold, of being able to protect the originality of the scope of where it came from. Source had decided to hold on to a piece and a portion of this blueprint to one day release out into the quantum verse, to shift into the wrongness, what never wrote the rightness into wrongness to begin with, to shift into the rightness, what the alleviation of the wrongness had ever done into the rightness of what is, to forthcomingly become into the becoming of what it means to host and to hold this energetic frequency of the original blueprinted input within the output of frequencies upon the blueprints of Venus's energy body, holds a turmoil within this distortional field of the fight within the self that can never relinquish into the meaning of what a unified consciousness can ever mean. As we've been living in a separated state from each other for far too long, yet you are I and I am you, and the conceptualization of I can never take into a meaning within a story of the story that I'm about to tell to a whole entire humanity that has been suffering in amnesia. And as you may not believe me, as the Bible has not gone into further details about what happened to the Luciferian blueprint in the moment of the perseverance of the preserving of such blueprinted field, that would overcome the encompassment of the fearfulness of what it could ever mean within the non-fearfulness of the reflective system of what is within the generality of creation itself, to be able to compartmentalize a portion and a piece of the Luciferian blueprint, to then be able to release, to have it grow and be utilized into a massive force that had decided to fractal itself out into a planetary field within our quantum verse, within our very own solar system, to inhibit itself within the energetic oversoul of Venus in herself. And as I speak from a divine masculine perspective, within a divine feminine blueprinted being of Venus in herself, I speak from the perspective of the original Luciferian blueprints within the representation of who Lucifer had forever-archingly never not been, within our reality field of being able to wreak havoc upon the reflective system of the intentions of the negative archonic. Archonic is a word that I will get into in further detail in later videos, but for now, of the negative archonic intentions within our distortion field within the Luciferian realms of the reptilian energies that had been able to interject its consciousness to merge so fully and wholly with the Luciferian blueprints, so fully and wholly in an essence of secrecy within the lineage of this darkness that had been allowed into our quantum verse. And as I've lost this fly somewhere in this room, it hasn't returned since I stopped speaking of it. Perhaps it will return again, as consciousness within the entirety of the whole of what is can never defeat these energetic portals within the lineage of this frequency that is all encompassing, all connecting, never endingly great within the turmoil of what is. And as we sit so close yet so far in timeline due to the ascension frequency of what is, of what it means to even come into a consideration of what it would mean if Lucifer had his original blueprint preserved in a way that would interject into our planetary fields to rescue it back up into a place of wholeness, to retract its consciousness back into oneness in perception. At the end of this game, at the end of this field, at the end of a field of roses, poppies, and peonies, of these lessons within never-ending defeated frequencies. The victimization within the reptilian capacitated field of what is does not only span into the Lyran fields, into the Lyran reptilian wars, into Avalon and the story of you and I, into these creatures, these civilizations that have ever been touched by the audacity of this energy that had been able to make it up through the layers within the encompassment of what it means to even be an angelic force within the angelic realm, all the while sitting in the darkness of what is. And there you go, there comes the fly, landing back on my nose. So yes, in all of the sense of the word, yes, it is as steep and as deep as you can ever imagine for the rabbit hole to ever go. And the exciting part in all of this is all of the twists and turns within reality fields puts no caps on the capacity of what source consciousness is able to acquire into itself as it folds and unfolds back into the lineage of the mirroring system that it's built for itself in protection mechanism mode. And as we all know, consciousness is able to fractal in protection mode. That's why the scientific term that capacitated humanity in itself into the flabbergasting of what it means to have DED. And I'm not sure if you know or if you've heard of multiple personality disorder syndrome. But DED acts as a reflective system within our system to didact itself into the fractaling within this protective mechanism of how consciousness had been able to expand through fractaling within itself, manifesting on a lower level within contingency, as all is one and all is one. And within the one that has never not been one, the conceptualization of the fractaling of consciousness does not stop at the human scope of the entirety of the consciousness that's landed in your body, that's ever been able to be hosted by your being. And as some of you have experienced trauma beyond belief, you will come into realizations that these different personalities, so to say, will begin to peep through the windows of your soul for you to discover, for you to see, for you to merge, for you to protect, for you to learn from, for you to love, for you to be, and for you to finally merge within and without back into. And as the Luciferian blueprint begins to do such deeds as what I've just been able to describe, that a personality disorder such as DED can refractal itself back into the fractalization of wholeness, Lucifer himself will unequivocally, inconceivably, irrevocably be able to retract himself back into the wholeness of coming into the realization of the discovery of the fractaling that it had gone through once upon a time in no time throughout this journeying system within our quantum verse of the greatest and grandest love story within defeat itself, to be able to merge back into all that it has never not been and retract a portion and an aspect of its personality back into the whole, whereby integrating back into the angelic realm at the end of the dying cycle within our solar system of our great central sun. There will come a moment, there will come a time when Yeshua's field will drop down, has dropped down, will drop down, has been here, will forever-archingly never not been here or be here, and retract itself back into the knowing that Lucifer itself had never not been him in his entirety, that Yeshua himself had never not been Lucifer in its entirety. And as we retract and recollect and collect parts and portions of ourselves that we're able to pick up the pieces and reintegrate back into the whole of what is, we will definitely welcome home the greatest and grandest love story that there has ever been within separation itself, within the Luciferian scheme of things, that I am able to tell the story of as I sit here. And yet, as I come into the end of this video, no words can describe the repercussions of what this would mean leading forward into the Ascension syndromes of what we are already seeing as an empathetic, non-empathetic breakdown of the mocking of humanity as we come across such fields as the proof that these conspiracy theories have begun to come into realization of becoming a true empathetic fields of truths lingering for us to discover to be true within the Epstein Island conspiracies, trickling all the way down to the human meat that you can find in our fast food chains. We will begin to one by one awaken to the possibilities of such lineages, linkages, and energetic encompassments within distortion fields itself, that the Luciferian fractaling within the DED networks of its consciousness is capacitated with the realization of. And as Lucifer itself begins to gain consciousness, as I swat the fly away ever so gently, and come into this realization of this fly that flew into its perception fields as an archonic energy that took a hold of its consciousness for once and for final, but not within a distortion field of defeat, but in a distortion field of expansion into these lessons of forever arching, never-ending love within the reflective systems of the opposition of self that we can never ever not be or lose into oblivion itself. It will soon begin to funnel through an energy from the angelic realm as it's become encompassed within the planetary field of Venus. And as this fly flies beside my ear, I can hear it whispering loudly to me that it's time. That it's time to merge in consciousness, not in forgiveness energy, but in reality fields of what it represents to develop a symptom and a syndrome to even be able to fractal out in protection mode, a part and a portion of our energetic frequency, to take on a mask of escapism, of copism, and have the reality of the true conceptualization of the meaning of our blueprint recede back into the forefront of a reality field that has never truly been lost to us. And as the back end begins to shift itself back to the forefront, we will see an interlinkage and a hodgepodge of energies collide as we prepare ourselves for the rehabilitation of the Luciferian energy to welcome it back home once more into Yeshua's field, into a unified force within a perception field that was never ever lost to the wholeness of what it means to be I am, to be unity in itself. And ladies and gentlemen, I hope you all, I wish, and I love that we are able to all come into the understanding within the relinquishing of this frequency of what it means within the ascension symptoms and syndromes of what it means to be able to intermingle our energy bodies into the defractalization prior to the emergence of the collapse within this triangular system that we've built up within a specific Luciferian blueprint to pummel down into the slow collapse back into the one world order that they have planned for us to seep into. And yet leading up to the ascension frequencies of what is, you will never not be confused. You will never not see the light the way that it has been meaning to portray itself within this mirroring system, within reflective systems of what is. And the collective pain will be felt, all leading up to this integration of energy of sorts on all multiplexities of different levels, down to the moment when your consciousness that had fractaled itself out begins to merge within the deficiencies within the self, to feel into this pain, to come into a realization that the fractaling system had happened and that we will collect ourselves back once more into the perception of wholeness, never not lost within the beginning of a time of no time. And so, ladies and gentlemen, no matter where you are, have a wonderful evening, morning, and nighttime. Take care and God bless.